The ruins of Arcadia. The Andorians slaughtered humans by the billions until they opened the wrong cryopods. Arcadia, once a thriving human colony, lay in smoldering ruins. Corpses littered the cratered streets, buildings crumbled into debris, and smoke choked out the midday sun. An old man surveyed the devastation, his face tight with restrained anguish. "Those Andorian bastards hit us out of nowhere," he growled. "We never even met them before, but they sure as hell knew us. And they wanted us gone for good." Alarms screamed as the alien warships materialized in the sky, raining superheated plasma onto the colony. Men, women, and children ran for their lives as white-hot fire consumed their homes. But the Andorians were thorough in their grim work. Young Terry Holmes sprinted through the fiery hellscape, lungs seared by the smoke, sweat evaporating off his skin. He had one desperate chance, one last hope for survival: the cryo chambers. The colony engineers built them for exactly this doomsday scenario. The pods could freeze a human, halting aging, slowing life signs to imperceptible levels. Only a madman would try them untested. An Andorian kill team dropped in Terry's path, their leader leveling an ionized plasma rifle at his heart. Moreira, his name tag read. He squeezed the trigger, then hesitated, some strange flicker of doubt or pity in his dark eyes. Terry didn't stop to ponder why. He hurdled Moreira and flattened his palms to activate the nearest cryopod, sealing himself within that icy coffin. Consciousness drained like water, but not before he heard Moreira's voice through the chamber speakers. The Andorian Empire. Arcadia was not the only world to suffer the Andorian wrath. Over the next decade, they systematically hunted down and exterminated human colonies across the galaxy, one by one. The Andorians' advanced technology and merciless tactics overwhelmed the human defenses. On the colony of New Eden, a squad of human soldiers made a desperate last stand. Outnumbered and outgunned, they fought to the last man, buying precious time for civilians to evacuate to hidden bunkers. Plasma bolts sizzled through the air, vaporizing the brave defenders where they stood. On the mining world of Helios Prime, a mother huddled in a secret underground shelter with her 2 young children. She held them close, praying the Andorians wouldn't find them. The sound of heavy footsteps and guttural alien voices drew nearer. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered for her kids to stay quiet. "We tried to fight back," the narrator said, his voice tinged with anger and frustration. "But we were hopelessly outmatched. The Andorians had technology we had never seen before, weapons that could vaporize a human with a single shot." An Andorian soldier aimed his plasma rifle at a fleeing man's back and pulled the trigger. The helpless victim vanished in a burst of superheated gas, leaving only a charred shadow on the wall. And they had something else too, a deep, seething hatred for our kind. They didn't just want to defeat us, they wanted to erase us from existence. In the end, only a handful of human colonies survived, hidden away in the most remote corners of the galaxy. The rest were wiped out, their inhabitants slaughtered or enslaved. Humanity teetered on the brink of extinction, and the Andorians rejoiced in our demise, awakening the last hope. Even as Terry Holmes slept in his icy coffin, the Andorians schemed. They knew their grisly work was unfinished. Inside an Andorian command center, Moreira stood before a galaxy map, studying the blinking dots. Red indicated the scattered remnants of humanity. Blue marked Arcadia. His commanding officer, a grizzled Andorian covered in battle scars, strode up beside him. "I witnessed the cryo chambers firsthand on Arcadia," the veteran said. "Every human is a threat, unpredictable, dangerous. Those chambers are their last refuge. Find them, destroy them at any cost." Moreira nodded, his face an impassive mask. Plasma fire lit up derelict colonies as Andorian kill teams stormed the chambers. Helpless humans, still dazed from cryo-sleep, were cut down where they stood. A few managed to snatch up weapons and fire back, but their sluggish reactions were no match for the aliens' ruthless precision. Humanity's last hope faded with each cryopod destroyed. The Andorians were relentless, methodical. They would not stop until they had erased every trace of humans from the stars. But there was one chamber that the Andorians did not find, hidden deep beneath the colony's wreckage. And within that chamber, Terry Holmes slept on, oblivious to his species' fate. The interior of Terry's cryopod filled the view, frost obscuring the walls. His face was barely visible through the icy haze, features slack in frozen slumber. As years turned to decades and decades to centuries, Terry remained suspended in his glacial cocoon. Outside, the galaxy moved on. The Andorians, drunk on victory, turned their sights to fresh conquests. They subjugated species after species, forging an empire that spanned the stars. The Andorians ruled with an iron fist, crushing resistance with ruthless efficiency. The galaxy's other species quickly learned to fear and obey their new masters, lest they suffer the humans' gruesome fate. It seemed the Andorian dominion over the galaxy was absolute and eternal. They had risen to become the cosmos' undisputed overlords, and across 100 worlds, species who once stood proud and defiant now knelt in submission, trembling at their conqueror's feet. But then something happened that no one could have predicted. On the ruined world of Arcadia, in the depths of the hidden Cryo chamber, Terry Holmes began to stir. The last human awakens. Inside the cryopod, Terry's eyelids fluttered. Frost cracked and flaked away as his muscles twitched, slowly waking from centuries of frozen slumber. The hiss of gas and a whir of machinery filled the chamber as the thawing process kicked into gear. With a gasp, Terry's eyes snapped open, his chest heaving as he sucked in lungfuls of stale air. He thrashed weakly against the pod's restraints, his mind foggy, his body racked by violent shivers. The cryopod's hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss. As Terry emerged from his centuries-long slumber, he found himself in a world he no longer recognized. The once familiar corridors of the cryo facility were now dark and crumbling, choked with dust and debris. Terry stumbled from the pod on shaking legs, his vision swimming. He leaned heavily against the pod's frame, waiting for feeling to return to his extremities. His gaze traveled the chamber, taking in the decaying walls, the flickering lights, the thick layers of grime coating every surface. Memories crashed over Terry in a dizzying wave. The Andorian attack, the desperate flight to the Cryo chambers, Marrera's cold eyes as he raised his weapon. Terry squeezed his eyes shut, bile rising in his throat. He staggered through the ruins of the facility, each step more sure than the last as his body remembered how to move. Fallen girders and chunks of concrete littered the corridors. Shattered screens hung limply from the walls, dead and dark. Terry's heart hammered as he climbed the final staircase and emerged onto Arcadia's surface. He raised a hand to shield his eyes from the harsh glare, his breath catching in his throat. Arcadia lay in ruins. The soaring towers had toppled, leaving only jagged stumps. The lush parks were now plains of ash and rubble. Smoke stained the sky a sickly gray, casting an oppressive pall over the devastation. For Terry, no time had passed. For him, the attack on Arcadia was only yesterday. But as he looked out over the ruins of his world, he began to realize the true scope of what had happened. Terry sank to his knees, his chest tight with grief and horror. Tears carved tracks through the grime on his face as he surveyed the wasteland that had once been his home. The full weight of the Andorian brutality crashed over him, stealing his breath. A glint of metal on the horizon wrenched Terry from his anguish. He staggered to his feet, squinting against the sun. A squad of figures marched toward the ruins, their armor catching the light. Andorians. They were part of a routine patrol, sent to ensure that no human survivors had emerged from hiding. The Andorians had never forgotten about Arcadia or the rumors of the hidden Cryo chambers. They had vowed to maintain their watch over the planet for as long as it took to ensure that humanity was truly extinct. Terry's blood ran cold as the implications sank in. The Andorians were here. They were coming for him. If they found him, He would suffer the same fate as the rest of his species. He had only moments to act. Spinning on his heel, Terry plunged into the maze of rubble and debris, his heart pounding. The sound of Andorian plasma fire crackled behind him as he ran, the heat of the blasts singing his back. Terry didn't look back. He couldn't afford to. He could only run deeper into the ruins of Arcadia. The hidden spacecraft. As the echoes of Andorian pursuit faded behind him, Terry's lungs burned, his heart pounding like a war drum. The ruins seemed to close in around him, a labyrinth of shattered concrete and twisted metal. He knew he was only delaying the inevitable. The Andorians were relentless, and they would never stop hunting him, not until he was dead like the rest of his kind. Terry skidded around a corner and froze, his eyes widening. Nestled among the rubble was a sight that Terry had never dared to hope for, an ancient human spacecraft, its hull battered and scorched but intact. It was a relic from a lost age, a time when humanity had reached for the stars with both hands. Terry approached the ship cautiously, hardly daring to believe it was real. He ran his hands over the pitted metal, marveling at the workmanship. The ship was a testament to human ingenuity and resilience, a symbol of a time when they had dared to dream. A plasma bolt sizzled past Terry's ear, jolting him back to the present. He whirled to see Andorian soldiers pouring into the clearing, their weapons raised. Terry didn't hesitate. He sprinted for the ship, his feet pounding on the cracked pavement. The ship's hatch was stuck, the mechanisms corroded by centuries of neglect. But Terry was an engineer, and he had always been good with his hands. With a final, desperate heave, the hatch groaned open. Terry flung himself inside, slamming the hatch shut behind him. The ship's interior was dark, the air stale and thick with dust. To Terry, it was the most beautiful sight he had ever seen. He threw himself into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the unfamiliar controls. The ship's systems were ancient, the technology clunky and outdated, but slowly, miraculously, they began to flicker to life. Outside, the Andorians had reached the ship. They pounded on the hull, shouting for Terry to surrender. But Terry's heart soared as the engines coughed, sputtered, and then roared to life. The ship shuddered as centuries of dust and grime were blasted away, the viewports clearing to reveal the ruins of Arcadia beyond. Terry's hands closed around the controls, a fierce grin splitting his face. The Andorians fell back, shielding their eyes as the ship's thrusters flared with blinding light. With a thunderous blast, the ship lifted from the rubble, the Andorians scattering before it like leaves in a hurricane. The weight of gravity fell away as the ship clawed for the sky, leaving the ruins of Arcadia behind. The ship punched through the clouds, the blue curve of the planet falling away beneath it. Terry sagged back in his seat, his heart racing. He had done it. He had escaped. But even as relief washed over him, Terry knew that his fight was far from over. As the ship hurtled into the void, Terry's mind raced with possibilities. He was the last human awake, the sole survivor of his species. He knew he couldn't take on the Andorian Empire alone, but maybe, just maybe, there was still hope. The hidden Cryo chambers. Terry's fingers danced over the controls, plotting a course deeper into unexplored space. Somewhere out there, hidden away on forgotten worlds, were other Cryo chambers like the one that had saved him. And within those chambers, the last of humanity slept, waiting to be awakened. Terry's jaw set as the stars blurred past the viewports. He didn't know how, and he didn't know when, but he swore to himself that he would find a way to wake his people, to lead them in a fight for survival against the Andorian scourge. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, starlight flooding the viewports. A small, pockmarked moon appeared ahead, its surface scarred by ancient impacts. Terry's hands clenched on the controls as the Cryo facility came into view. Had the Andorians already found this place? Had he come all this way only to find cold corpses and shattered pods? But as the ship swooped low over the lunar surface, Terry's fears melted into astonishment. The Cryo facility stood intact, its reinforced doors still sealed, its reactor still pulsing with power. Against all odds, this hidden outpost had endured the long centuries untouched by Andorian wrath. With exquisite care, Terry docked the ship and cycled the airlock. Dust swirled around his boots as he moved down the long, dormant corridors, the only sound the hum of ancient machinery and the rasp of his own breath in his helmet. Terry rushed to the control console, his hand shaking as he initiated the revival sequence. One by one, the cryopods hissed open, disgorging clouds of vapor into the frigid air. Figures stirred within, coughing and shivering as they clawed their way back to consciousness. A woman stumbled from her pod, her eyes wide and haunted. She stared at Terry as if he were a ghost. What happened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "The last thing I remember, the Andorians were attacking. How long were we out?" Terry's voice was rough with emotion as he replied, "Centuries. We're all that's left." As the other survivors emerged, huddling together in shock and confusion, Terry felt a swell of bittersweet joy. They were no longer alone, no longer the last of their kind. In this forgotten corner of the universe, the embers of humanity still glowed. Terry squared his shoulders, facing his fellow survivors with fire in his eyes. "The Andorians think they've won. They think they've wiped us out. But we're still here. We're still fighting. And we're going to take back our worlds and make those alien bastards pay for what they've done." Slowly, hesitantly, the other humans nodded. A murmur of agreement ran through the group, a flicker of defiant hope. In that moment, the true resistance began, a ragtag band of survivors, the last of the human race, united by an unbreakable will and a shared thirst for justice. Rising from the ashes, Terry's words hung heavy in the air as the newly awakened survivors gathered around him, their eyes wide with a mix of fear and determination. "We have to move fast," Terry said, his gaze sweeping over the assembled humans. "The Andorians will be tracking the energy signatures from the Cryo chambers. They'll be here soon, and we need to be long gone by then." He quickly laid out the grim reality of the galaxy under Andorian rule: the subjugation, the oppression, the relentless hunt for any remaining humans. The survivors listened in grim silence, the weight of their situation sinking in. But there was a steely resolve in their eyes, a fire that refused to be extinguished. These were no ordinary humans. They were survivors, each and every one of them. They had endured the unimaginable, and they were ready to fight for their freedom. Together, the group huddled around a flickering holographic display, formulating a daring plan. Terry traced his finger over the star map, marking the locations of other Cryo facilities. "We split up," he said, his voice steady with conviction. "My group will take the ship I arrived in. The rest of you find whatever vessels you can in this facility. Shuttles, transports, anything that can fly." He tapped a point on the map, a small, unremarkable star system. "We'll meet here at these coordinates. From there, we'll gather our forces and strike back against the Andorians." There were nods of agreement, grim smiles of anticipation. The humans divided into teams, each one tasked with a different Cryo facility. As they prepared to depart, Terry pulled aside a young man named Jason, his eyes intense. "Jason, you're in charge of the Delta facility. We're counting on you. Find as many of our people as you can and bring them to the rendezvous." He clasped Jason's hand, his grip firm. "Together, we can end this nightmare once and for all." Jason returned to grip, his jaw set with determination. "We won't let you down, Terry. We'll be there, no matter what." With final farewells and wishes of luck, the group split up, each heading for their assigned ships. Terry settled into the pilot's seat of the ancient vessel, his crew arrayed behind him. He took a deep breath, his hands resting on the controls. The ships powered up, their engines humming to life. And so the last remnants of humanity set out into the void once more, no longer mere survivors, but warriors on a mission. The Andorians had ruled the galaxy unchallenged for centuries, crushing all who opposed them. But now they would face a force they had never encountered before. the indomitable spirit of a species pushed to the brink, fighting for its very existence. This was only the beginning, the first spark of a rebellion that would soon blaze across the stars. Humanity was awake once more, and they would not rest until they were free. The ships blasted off, streaking into the void, their ion trails fading against the endless black. The hushed Cryo chamber fell away behind them, a silent monument to a lost age. Ahead lay only uncertainty and danger, but also the glimmer of hope, the chance for a new beginning. The rebellion grows. The narrator's voice swelled with pride as he recounted the humans' daring offensive. The Andorian strongholds, once thought unassailable, crumbled under the furious onslaught of the human fleet. The aliens scrambled to mount a defense, but they were caught flat-footed, their complacency turned to